All right, so thanks everyone for joining the Southland Regional Meeting for Power and Nature. I'm delighted to introduce Meghan Hertel from the California Natural Resources Agency. She's the Deputy Secretary for Habitat and Biodiversity, and she's here today to talk to us about how we're going to successfully get to 30 by 30 by making sure that all of our maps are correct. So Meghan, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. And like she said, I'm happy to have this be a conversation. I have some slides, but would welcome anyone to jump in at any point with questions or comments or things that they want to add. And also just really a pleasure to spend a Friday afternoon with you all before a holiday break. So thank you for taking the time to do so. I hope you all have your little eggnogs just off screen, because that will be me later today. But like Melanie said, my goal for today really is to talk a little bit about the 30 by 30 mapping component of it. And there's a few reasons that we've been partnering with Power and Nature to have these regional conversations. And one of them is we are coming to the end of the Newsom Administration term. And we'll talk a little bit about his leadership on this, but we're going to have one more annual report under his leadership. And we really want to make sure that we're showing as much accuracy in the data that we're reporting as possible. And we want it not just to be able to show a gain in the percent that we're reporting as conserved, but also to really understand what is actually protected out on the landscape and where we need to create the linkages between those protected areas so that we don't reach 2030 with a bunch of postage stamps of habitat. And also to understand where we've got gaps. Where are we missing actual habitat protections? What regions do we not have a sufficient amount of habitat protected? And so those are two of the reasons. And then the third reason we've been meeting with each regional group is you know your community and your lands better than we ever will at the state. And so we're hoping that in addition to finding things that should be counting for 30 by 30 that are not right now, that you might actually identify new areas where increased protection or increased biodiversity management could help further move the needle on 30 by 30. So more work that we could do to bring new lands under 30 by 30. So those are our two goals with today. And let's see if I can more smoothly share my screen than I did this morning. Bear with me, and I'll put it in presenter mode. And I know many of you are 30 by 30 experts and could give this presentation as well as I could, if not better. So I will try to be as brief as possible on the background. Okay, can folks see the main screen?
No, we're seeing the presenter view.
Oh, okay. Let me try that again. That's interesting because I only see the presenter view, or I mean the main view. Okay, we'll go one more time. I jinxed myself by saying I would do it better this time, Melanie.
That's all right. It happens to the best of us.
Okay, how about now?
Nope, still presenter.
Okay, let us swap it.
Yeah.
And now?
There we go. That worked.
Okay, great. See if I can close this to see. And now I can see you all. Okay, great. So I did want to just mention I'm the only one from our team right now, but we also have three other teammates that work here at California Natural Resources on 30 by 30. Madeline Drake, who I hope many of you have met. We also have a data scientist who works on the GIS part of that. That's Cole. And we have a Climate Action Corps fellow who does much of our communications, and that is Rita. So that is our full team here at CNRA that work on this effort. All right, so we talked a little bit about Governor Newsom. So he was the first governor in the United States to pass and to do an executive order on 30 by 30. And this is really one of his top commitments. I was telling the group earlier today that we actually report up to the governor's office on a quarterly basis. He asks questions back on how 30 by 30 is going, what is not working, what's working. So this is very much still in his focus, and we want to be able to show as much meaningful progress under this as we can. Also, thanks to many of you on this call, it is actually a law in California. So it will outlast this administration, both because it is a law, but also because all of the great work that all of you are going to be continuing to do under 30 by 30, even past next January. So I know many of you have seen this type of presentation before, but just a reminder, when this was passed in 2020, we did 18 months of public process to come up with the strategy and the definition for what counts for 30 by 30. And we continue to work against that strategy and use that definition. We're always adaptively managing our priorities and how we approach it, but we've held strong to that definition, which I think is a really great thing because the definition is quite robust and quite strong in comparison to some other places that have 30 by 30. We also did over 70 tribal consultations. We had topical advisory committees, and we had over 1,000 detailed comments come in, including many from, I think that was like the birth of Power in Nature, right, Melanie? Is that kind of the formation of it? So thank you all for your work on that effort. We really use that to put together the pathways document that now guides our work. So as a reminder, this is where we're at. We're at about 26.1% of lands conserved, and we've got 21.9% of coastal waters. And I put this slide up here mostly because I want to remind folks of what it means to count for 30 by 30. And to count, it needs to be durably protected, so have some sort of protection on it that makes conversion to a non-biodiversity use difficult, right? So that could be an easement, it could be a deed restriction, it could be owned by the federal government with some sort of act of Congress or other acts that restricts development. The second piece is it needs to be managed for biodiversity, and we'll get into this a little bit more. It doesn't need to be solely managed for biodiversity, but biodiversity needs to be one of the top goals of the property. And so those are the two things that we're looking for when we count something for 30 by 30. So I always like to show this slide because it's a little bit of like, here's some examples of what counts, and here's some examples of things that we don't count. So on the top, there's some pretty obvious ones that you might recognize and be like, oh, of course that counts. And so places like national parks or other really wild places, this is a picture of Yosemite, that are providing that really top-notch biodiversity, that counts. The one in the middle on the top row is some people don't think about. So this is actually a mitigation bank that also uses cattle to try to manage the grassland for the benefit of birds and other wildlife. And so this is an example both of a working landscape as well as a private investment area. Both of those are contributing with biodiversity as a top goal, and so that counts. And then the third one on the top row, it may be surprising for someone. This is out of Redwoods Rising project. So this is an effort to actually do restoration on an area that had long been logged for timber. So now it has a durable protection on it, and they're actually coming in and doing active restoration to try to restore forest health, and in this case, do some watershed restoration. Now the bottom row are ones that don't count. So Vic, I hope you laughed when you saw the golf course, because every time I see a golf course, I think about Audubon certified golf courses, which are not actually an Audubon product. There are golf courses that can provide biodiversity benefits, right? But the primary purpose is recreation and the bulk of the property, and they will often sacrifice biodiversity benefits for recreation. And so this is one that doesn't count. In the middle, solar development. We know we have to address our climate objectives if we're going to be successful in saving biodiversity. These are the twin crises that sit together, but also there are places where solar is the primary objective, not biodiversity, so that wouldn't count. There are things you can do on renewable energy projects that benefit biodiversity and can make them better for biodiversity, but it's really not the top objective, and they're really not managing for that, so that doesn't count. And then the last one, agriculture. We often hear from farmers and ranchers that they need more recognition for the important work they're doing for biodiversity. And it is absolutely true. Our working landscape in California can do amazing things both for climate and biodiversity. But in a case like this, where it's production ag for, I think that's strawberries, really the top goal there is creating food for all of us. And that's okay, and that's good. And there's things they can do for biodiversity, but it's really not the top objective. So that does not count. So I'll pause because I just went through some examples of like ins and outs and see if anyone has any questions or comments on those. Nothing shocking on that. It's good when I don't see any like appalled faces. Vic, go ahead.
Grazing land seems like an ambiguous category, gray area.
Yeah, so some grazing lands don't count and some do. So for them to count, they need to be durably protected. So they've got to have some sort of conservation easement or otherwise on it. And they need to have a management plan where biodiversity is a top objective, where really the rancher, while they are making money, is really using that cattle to think about how do we benefit the plants and animals that exist on that landscape. So we have quite a few rangelands that don't count, and then we do have some that have that higher level conservation easement and commitment that do. Great question, Vic. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. Just a reminder that we've got from our strategy in the 18-month process, we came up with 10 different pathways or strategies that all contribute to 30 by 30. Hi, Dan. So it's not just conservation acquisitions and easements, it's also restoring that land. It's looking at moving forward advanced mitigation. I really put the accelerate regionally led conservation in red on this one because that was one of my top goals with this call is really it's about the work you all are doing in your region. You know your lands the best. You know what is already protected and where there's opportunities going forward. So that's the one we're leaning into today. Dan, just sharing with you, feel free to jump in at any point with comments or questions. I've got slides, but love for this to be a conversation. Okay, so what do we have left to do? 4 million acres, no big deal, right? In the remaining 5 years, and about 283,000 acres in coastal water. So that's what it's going to take for us to get to our 30% objective by 2030. That is going to include things like new acquisitions and easements, ancestral land return, and then likely working with governments, local and federal, to increase protection levels or biodiversity management. It's going to be challenging on the federal level for the next several years, but know that that is a piece of our strategy. So pretty big objectives, but I know we've got such a strong conservation community here that I am confident we will get there. All right. So now the data nerd part. So we have quite a few tools online that can help you understand what already counts for 30 by 30 and help you do analyses to understand where there may be more opportunities. And we're going to talk a lot about what already counts because that's where we need quite a bit of help of identifying what we're missing, if we have something miscategorized, but also looking for where there's new opportunities. Oh, I did mean to say, so there's 4 tools. The top is the Conservation Area Explorer, which we'll spend most of our time in today. But there's also one where you can look at access, so how close are conserved lands to communities. It pulls in CalEnviroscreen information on that, so that's an interesting one to look at. There's a Biodiversity Explorer that allows you to look at things like connectivity and species richness in relation to what's already protected. And then the last one does the same thing from a climate perspective. Okay, so this is that first one I talked about. This is the Conserved Areas Explorer. You can go to CA Nature, and I'll have a QR code that you can go to later, and I'll send Melanie some resources to send out. But you can zoom in anywhere on this state and look at what currently counts as conserved. You can click on that parcel and see who the landowner is, the amount of it's conserved, and whether it's open to public access or not. And you can look at a county level and also an eco-regional level. So this is our effort to be so super transparent about what counts and what doesn't count, so that the public can hold California accountable and also so you can see where there's gaps and opportunities. So this is a zoom in here. So this is San Benito County, but this is if you were to go into this and you zoom right down to the county level. And what you'll see here is several different colors. You see a dark green and a light green. Those represent gap 1 and 2 codes, and we'll talk about those, but those are what count for 30 by 30. And then you'll see yellow and gray, and that represents gap 3 and 4 codes. 3 and 4 do not currently count for 30 by 30. And hopefully if I talk short enough, we'll have time to actually zoom into some of the data and look at what's counting and not, because I think you're going to see things like, hey, why doesn't that count in my county? Okay, and I do always like to point out that we do try to track the level of protection by habitat type across the state. You can also zoom into your county and look at a county level, how much of our wetlands in the county are protected, how much of our grasslands are protected. So I think this is a really interesting planning tool people can use when they start to think about where are their gaps. I do like to point out that this is of existing habitat. So take, for example, wetlands. Statewide, it shows we've conserved about 46%, 47% of our wetlands. That's of our current existing wetlands. And I think all of you are tried and true conservationists on this call, so you know we've lost 95% of our wetlands. So what we're showing here is we've conserved almost half of that remaining 5% we've got left. So this is not meant to be a substitute for how much do we want to have in the future. It's rather how much have we conserved of what we've got now. Maybe I'll pause and see if anyone has a question on that.
I have a question, but it's more on the side of, could we upload a file to help understand what it's contributing to in these habitat types?
Ooh, that's a good question. So you mean if you had a parcel that you wanted to conserve, could you Let me follow up on that with you, Melanie, because that's a really interesting idea. I think there's a way that you could zoom in on the Biodiversity Explorer or on the Conservate and see what the habitat types are under that parcel. We don't currently have an ability for you to upload something. So, but I'll follow up.
And I'll pitch a benefit here because I'm thinking about it in terms of when you're applying for a grant from like the Wildlife Conservation Board. And
Yep.
if you're less sophisticated on the GIS side, but have the ability to upload a Google Earth file, you can get the data that they're interested in having you write about in your grant application.
That is a really interesting concept, right? Because it would just allow you to almost screenshot it and pull it down.
That's
Okay,
right.
I wrote that one down. That's a great idea. Also, if anyone else has awesome ideas like that, please always happy to hear new things that we should be thinking about. We may sign you up to work on it, but we're always happy to take them. All right, so there's two primary data sources that we use to inform that mapping tool that I just showed you, and it's CCED and CPAD. So that's the California Conservation Easement Database and the California Protected Area Database. These are two databases that exist outside of 30 by 30, and we did that on purpose. We didn't want people to have to report to these and then report to 30 by 30 and then report to somewhere else. There's already a lot of that happening. So our goal was to ask people to update their 30 by 30 information into these two separate public databases that inform a lot of other studies. So those are the primary ones that drive us. They have these things called gap codes, which are USGS classifications. And it's those gap codes 1 and 2 that count, gap code 3 and 4 that don't. I want to recognize that habitats are dynamic, landscapes are complicated, and it's rare that they perfectly fit in buckets. So it's a little bit, we have to live with the complexity that we're trying to bucket things that don't always fit perfectly in buckets. Okay, so here, yeah, Jade's like, I feel that. Jade's been there before. Here's our gap codes. So gap code 1 is areas that are managed for biodiversity and protected where natural disturbance are allowed to happen. So think fires or floods. And that's because we know ecosystems actually do rely often on natural disturbance. Climate change is making those natural disturbances much more extreme and the impacts more extreme. But there is a role for periodic disturbance in many different ecosystems. Second one, gap 2, is where it's protected, managed for biodiversity, but where natural disturbances are suppressed, which frankly is basically all of California. We're trying to get better about letting healthy fire be in place, but for the most part, we hold back most natural disturbances. 3 is where it is protected, but it is not like it's subject to extreme extractive uses. And so this one is where it gets a little bit gray. We've been working with foresters to try to help folks understand when they're managing a forest for forest health, but also cutting some trees, that can count. If you're clear cutting with timber as you're being your top objective, not going to count. So we try to put that word high intensity in there to help distinguish. And gap code 4 could mean it doesn't qualify because it's not protected, not managed for biodiversity, or we may just not have data for it, which is often the case, is we just don't have the data. Okay, for those of you that are visual learners, there is a flow chart. I will send this out in PDF format afterwards, but it basically walks you through the process. If you have a parcel, how do you determine what gap code to go into? This is an overall simplified version. The text is very tiny on my screen, so I'm going to assume that none of you can read it as well. Just know it's there. I'll send it in a PDF and you can zoom. All right, so we're going to go back into this a little bit more. So this CA Nature, it's updated once a year with information about what counts for 30 by 30. I'm going to give you two tools coming up that allow you to look at data and update it if you think it's incorrect. The first one is we're piloting a new survey tool. So if you scan this QR code, it'll take you to basically a Microsoft form that allows you to put in your name and your contact, and then walks you through the process of finding out whether land that you manage or land that is in your county or your region counts for 30 by 30 and updating it. It also has a helpful place where you can just say, I don't know what I'm doing, please call me. And it will go to Green Info and us, and someone will reach out to you to walk you through that process a little bit more. If you're using this form and you have suggestions on ways to improve the form, please do let us know. This is our first year using it, and so we're always looking for ways to improve on that. The second way that you can look at whether or not data is accurate, either that you manage or in your region, is you can go to this website, which is a Green Info Network website. And you can actually search for a landowner. So you could type in Sea and Sage Audubon, Vic, right? Like you could put that in there. And then a spreadsheet will pop up that shows all of the parcels that you own and manage that we know about and whether or not it counts for 30 by 30. So this is a great way, like you can go and you could put in City of Long Beach, County of Orange, and it will pull up all the records of the land that we think should count for 30 by 30 and whether or not it currently is or not. More tiny text, but this is what the spreadsheet looks like. It actually looks very complicated, but it's quite simple. So in the third column, and this is for county, this is Los Angeles County Department of Parks and Rec. So in the third column, sorry, I have to lean over to actually be able to see this. You'll see the name of the parcel. So the first one is Spinelli Regional Park, if I'm able to read that small text. And if you look all the way across to column N and O, it shows that that entire park is gap code 4, so not counting. And in fact, if you look at all the parks that are listed under this one, they're all on gap code 4, which means none of the parks right now that are managed by Los Angeles County Parks and Rec are counting for 30 by 30. Now, some of those parks are going to be soccer fields. They're going to be swimming pools, right? They're going to be parking lots. Those would not count. But I'm going to guess that some of those parks are probably natural open spaces with just some trails on them, and those should likely count. So we really need folks like yourselves to take a look at some of these records and then help us connect with the right people in the county or city to be able to get these updated. Same example for Orange County. So the first park on here is O'Neill Regional Park. That is classified as gap 4. Skimming down, most of the regional parks that are on the screen are gap 4, which means they're not counting. We last year had our interns reach out to, I'll come to you a second, Melanie, reach out to all 58 counties in California, asking them to update their data. It's very hard to find the right person within the county, and we don't know which regional parks should count and which don't. So this is really where we need some help. Melanie?
So similar to the Central Coast, I would love to request from you the spreadsheets for the Southland counties. I think we can contribute quite a bit, and just I'll look at Santiago or O'Neill or Peters Canyon. All of those are part of an NCCP HCP. So
Yes.
that
Great.
means you're missing a lot because they have some level of protected status
Action.
due to that mitigation. So we can certainly put you in touch with the right folks at OC Parks.
Awesome.
And one of the benefits when I was working with Friends of Harbors Beaches and Parks, I went through literally every single parcel for every single regional park and wilderness park in the county to determine why it was set aside for protected status. So we have the background documents to justify all of that. So
wonderful, wonderful. Jade, I see you. Yeah, there is a lot of turnover on the staffing. The one other thing I want to point out on this is we actually have the ability to subdivide off of parcels. So some of these, like this first one is 85 acres of land. We have the ability to say, okay, well, about half of that is actually contributing to biodiversity and half of that has too high of intensity uses. And so we can split it across gap codes. So we have an ability to refine quite a bit. When you see it on the map, the whole parcel will show up, say like 60% of it is gap 2. The whole parcel will show up gap 2, but when you click on it, it'll show the percent breakdown. And in the percent roll up for the full state, it accurately calculates. Okay, I know. Steve, I feel like you're a spreadsheet person because you look real happy right now. Sometimes people look at spreadsheets and they're like, too much, but Steve looks thrilled, which makes me happy.
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles County, so I know a lot of the properties that are mentioned there.
Great, great. We will not be able to count our way to 30 by 30, nor do we want to. I think this is a really important point. We think there's probably about 1 million acres that are not correctly calculated right now. We don't think there's more than that. And we really do see 30 by 30 as also driving new conservation. So as you look at your regional map and you see areas and you're like, why doesn't that count? And you find out it doesn't have durable protection. What a great opportunity to go talk to that entity about putting protection in place. And there are tools that are not full conservation easements that have to go to the Wildlife Conservation Board that you can put on deeds that restrict future use of it. So there's a real lot of opportunity here to drive new conservation as well. So again, two options for looking at data and correcting it. You can fill out the survey when you find data that needs to be corrected, or you can go to those spreadsheets and look up individual landowners and determine where they are at on the gap code assignments. So Green Info Network, which is the GIS company that does manage CCED and CPAD for the state, they do updates twice a year. One is in December and one is in March. So they will be doing a release of new data on CPAD and CCED in December, and they will be updating all of those spreadsheets in January. So just Melanie, I may wait until about mid-January to send it to you just so that next update comes in, because the spreadsheets we're looking at now are from last March because it's not real-time updated. Okay, so I think we went through all of these. This is just, again, if you don't manage the land, but you see areas that you think should be fixed, you can still put them through that the pilot tool, or you can reach out and let us know and try to put us in touch with the land manager. If you have a contact with the land manager, helps a ton, makes it much easier for us. All right, so I think that is it on my end. Happy to take questions or pull up the actual website and look at your regions with you.
Does anyone have any specific questions, or do we actually want to dive into maps? Go ahead, Vic.
Well, thank you very much, Megan. I wonder if there are major landowning agencies like, say, the National Forest Service, where there is a blanket assumption that all those properties are conserved to this standard.
Great question. So not all federal or state or public lands are created equal. And so something like the national forests, not all of those lands count, but they have different designations under their ownership, some of which do count. So wilderness areas in national forest lands do count because that is an act of Congress and you can't do substantial drilling or mining on those once designated. To juxtapose that, roadless rural areas, which are a precursor to wilderness areas, do not count because that is an administrative designation, which, as we've seen this past year, can be overturned. So it's a little challenging because there's durable. What does durable mean? Like, how do you define that? So for us, it needs to be a high bar to overturn it. Another example would be like national monument designations. That requires an act of the president or Congress to overturn. So currently those count. Should the Trump administration overturn successfully the Chuckwalla or any of the other designations, we would remove them from the count. So, great question, Vic.
Marcia.
Yeah, we just this week received notice that it looks like we have a willing seller for one of the parcels we put onto the list.
Nice.
Fortunately, it's called Bird Island, so I think you might know why it's important. It's at the confluence of a couple of streams here in LA County near the coast. And I just wondered, we have been in contact with a private foundation who's also interested in supporting 30 by 30. And if we have them interested, and we know there is some money, I believe, from Proposition 4 at the state, from the climate bonds, what's the best way to go about dealing with this? Should we be going through our elected officials, some who are in flux right now, or should we be just contacting you directly to see how we could get this purchase to happen?
Great. I am pulling up a website for you really quick. Let me get this and put it in chat. Okay, so I'm going to drop in chat the Climate Bond Accountability website for CNRA, California Natural Resources Agency. So on this website, you'll find resources about what grant programs they're out there from Proposition 4 to be able to apply to funding for. There's a bit of a delay on the rollout of the funding because of some procedural issues. Many advocates are trying to address that challenge. But as soon as we can get through some of the difficulties of getting public funds out the door, we're ready to start granting. So I'd encourage you to look at that website. It talks about the different places you can apply for funding. I will say there are a lot of folks who are lining up for the funding. So if there are additional strategies that you would like to try, like bringing along foundations and local electeds, I think that always helps increase the likelihood of a project success. And you've got some really incredible conservationists on this phone from Dan, Melanie. Gosh, each of you have done incredible acquisitions and easements, and I would bet would be a happy resource for you.
Claire.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had done specific outreach to like the major private conservancies in the state, like the Wildlands Conservancy and TNC and so forth.
Yes, absolutely. So I was joking on the last call. I call it dialing for acres, where I'm just like, hey, did you close on any acquisitions in this last year? So for sure, we work quite closely with the California Council of Land Trust. Thank you, Kim, for your partnership on that to try to reach many of the land trust organizations in California, and then also work directly with some of the really big ones to ask what they've been proceeding on as well. And Proposition 4, all of the acquisitions and easements that are awarded through that will have a new grant requirement that requires you to report to CPAD and CCED to try to also institutionalize this so that each year we're not asking folks to remember what they did over the last year and try to help us update the reporting.
Thanks.
All right, I'm not
Great
seeing
question.
any other questions, so maybe we hop over to the map side of things.
Great. Okay, let's
We start with
see.
LA County since LA's in the house.
All right, let's go application window. Okay, can you see the website?
Not yet.
There we go.
Okay, so this is our californianature.ca.gov website. I'm going to actually navigate through it just so you can watch how we go about it. So this is our main page, the cover page, and it's got information on our events. You can find the current status, all of our reports that we issue. But basically, you're going to go to this Mapping and Data Tools button right here. And then you scroll down and you'll see Explorer application. And there's that one we were looking at earlier. Feel like my internet's working a little faster, Melanie, than it was earlier today. And this takes you to the main screen of it. So you'll see our current status statewide. And then over here, you can actually zoom into any parcel. And as it loads, you'll be able to click on it. And it tells you this is Merced Grasslands Conservation Easement. It's 100% in GAP 2. It is managed by the Nature Conservancy, and it's closed to the public. So this is the type of data that you can find for all of them. There are some exceptions to this. So we try to respect data sovereignty for tribes. And so we're very careful about posting information about tribal ancestral lands. We only do it with their permission. And then there are a few rare cases where private landowners have felt very strongly about not having their individual name on the land. And so we've wiped the individual landowner's name and said that it was private. But otherwise, you're able to really see quite a bit of information about the parcel here. So you would click on terrestrial detail. And then you would come to the left and you select your county. And you said Los Angeles was our first start?
Sure.
Okay, so you click on Los Angeles. And then what you can see over here is, so Los Angeles County right now is showing about 20.8% counting of Los Angeles County is counting for 30 by 30. You can see the breakdown between the gap codes. And I always find this one really interesting. You can also see what type of land is contributing to this. Always the federal is generally the biggest piece, just because about half of California is owned and operated by the federal government, but you can actually zoom in and see how much is a special district versus a city, all of those things. All right, so I'm going to expand the map itself, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm happy to zoom in if folks have any questions about something specific they want to look at. But as a reminder, so the dark green and the light green are what counts right now. The yellow is gap 3, so not counting, and gap 4 is this light gray.
So I will ask specifically, see where the word El Monte is?
Yep.
Yeah, so the stuff below that into the county line, a lot of that is mitigation for the landfill that happened right there at the 60 and 605, and it's protected through a joint powers authority as mitigation.
That should count. Does it have, and it has biodiversity as one of its top goals?
Absolutely. They've
Yeah,
restricted access for people so that the animals have free reign during most hours that are important to them. So we can put you in touch with the Habitat Authority, who it's 4,000 acres on that one.
wonderful. Let me make a note of that. That's great. Habitat Authority. And we did work with CalUrba this year, and so they've updated about 30,000 acres of mitigation lands. I don't know if this is captured, so we'll do the follow-up on it, but Melanie, that would be amazing.
Okay. I've got it in my notes.
Anyone else want to see their backyard?
I also see the expanded San Gabriel Mountains National Monument. The expansion area is not yet updated.
Correct. And we actually, someone on the North Coast Power and Nature meeting caught that one. So that will be updated on the next one. So thank you for catching it.
There's also right along the coast, there's a gray stripe there. It's right below LAX, and it is primarily preserved for the endangered El Segundo blue butterfly, even though it's under ownership of either LAX, LAWA, or I think there's some, maybe the FAA owns part of it, but definitely a good portion of it is preserved for the butterfly.
Amazing. Is that this one, the El Segundo Dunes?
Yes.
Okay, I made a note of that. And you'll see like a lot of this is for, right? And so that either means we don't have the data for it, which is often the case, or someone's designated it as for. This is one where I suspect we just don't have the data. Vic.
Oops, you're muted.
Thank you, Megan. For each parcel, is there a date
Ooh.
for each parcel indicating when it was evaluated for its gap status?
I don't think that there is a date in CPAD CCED for evaluation, but I can check on that one with Green Info Network because I don't know all of the attributes they track for it.
I'm pretty sure when I've submitted stuff in the past through CPAD, the date was captured in that. So it doesn't appear to be a field that's showing here, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right, that it's probably in CPAD and CCED. There is this interesting challenge that we've got right now as we start to update some of this data. You know, even if there is a date, it would show that we updated it on a certain date, but a new acquisition would also have that same date. And so a question we frequently get is how much of this is brand new versus how much of this is fixing your data? And unfortunately, we don't have the ability to sort between that right now. We also have some, I gave this example earlier, we have some folks where technically the land counts for 30 by 30 because it's durably conserved and has a management plan or managed for biodiversity. But the owner of the property felt that it was too degraded to actually be providing biodiversity habitat and so has chosen to not include it in 30 by 30. And then later added it back into 30 by 30 when they got the off-road vehicle use under control. So there is data that is changing for a variety of reasons, which can make, you know, tracking quite complicated, but sounds like there is the data in there, Vic.
That could be useful.
Yep,
Yeah.
for sure.
For us in looking at the data. At which parcels to target.
Should we head over to Orange County?
Sure. County. All right, the County of Orange. Ones like that are very linear like this, I always like to look at those. Always wondering what is so skinny and long right there.
So the first thing I notice is a lot of the NCCP lands here are also missing, which I kind of mentioned. And I believe it's about 40,000 acres. But
Wow.
some of them are included. Looks like the Irvine Company's dedication of 20,000 acres is in here, but yeah, you need to talk to Orange County Parks for sure. And then also it looks like the Orange County Transportation Authority's mitigation lands are not, they're listed as a GAP 4. They are NCCP HCP lands. as well. The easements haven't necessarily been recorded yet, but they're in a conservation plan. So,
Great.
and they were
Great.
mitigation for freeway projects.
Great. Great.
How
And I
about
do,
Brush Canyon? Oop. How
go
about Brush Canyon, Melanie?
Yeah, so if you see where it says Chino Hills State Park and you zoom in on that darker green, yeah, that is not showing up either. Okay,
Brush Canyon.
yep.
Got it. And so this data that you're looking at right now is data that was updated in July of last year because it's pulling from the last March Green Info update. We update it when we release our public report. So I do want to acknowledge that there's been a big push this last year. I think we did talk to the County of Orange, but we should follow up on that. So some of this may already be captured, but all these ideas are very, very welcome. But if you talk to them, don't be like, you're slacking, you're not reporting. Just ask if they have reported on things.
Click on the gray area that's above the San Ana River Trail. Yeah, that big one. Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
No, there's separate Brush Canyon ones. Sometimes they have the same name. Huh. I don't think the ownerships are right.
They're
That
owned
is
by
also
the city
potential.
of Yorba Linda.
Yeah.
Say, you're Belinda. Got it.
About the Tonner Hills open space. Brea owns.
Yeah, that's a conservation easement. It's not in here either. Dan.
Yeah, hi Megan. There's probably some pieces down in the Rancho Mission Viejo in the very southern part of this map that you know may not be there, and I can put you or whoever in touch with someone who would sort that out, and I can also do that for the TCA. I
That
could
would be wonderful, Dan. Thank
just
you so much.
I'll just send you all an email, sort
Great.
of an introductory email.
Perfect. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Those connections go a really long way. Also, just a reminder, can go on, let's see if I can do this real time. There is that toolkit where you can actually go in, and I actually find this the easier way to look for data. I don't know if you can see my screen. Did it change?
Yeah, it did.
Yep.
We're good.
Okay. So you can go on this page and download your toolkit. And then what would be a good name to put in?
What are we looking up? An owner?
Yeah. What's one of the owners that you just talked about?
How about Orange County Transportation Authority?
I gotta move our pictures. So then it pops up and you can click on it and it downloads a little file.
Mm,
And that actually is both the geo files, so the GIS files, as well as the actual tables. And then it just pulls up a table that you can eventually see,
great.
which I find to be the easiest way to look. So this shows you all the Orange County Transportation Preserves.
Mhm.
And then you can see that actually there's just one that's under gap code. The other ones don't have data.
Okay, we're not seeing that, but
Oh, bummer.
that's okay. We know where to look.
Nowhere to look.
Anything else in Orange County? We could look at San Bernardino since we cover that, and we have some folks here for that area.
The State Parks Commission just this week designated the Wildwood Canyon State Park property, but I take it that it will depend on what's put into the cornerstone document over the coming year that will determine its gap level.
Mm-hmm.
And we have basically the western side of the county in this region.
Mm. Got it. So this area over here.
Yeah, and I'd look to Dan, and then we could zoom in, yeah, a little bit here.
Look at the legacy of the checkerboard. Isn't that amazing to see? So crazy. I would assume this is all BLM land. Yep. So on BLM land, similar to the question earlier from Vic, not all Bureau of Land Management land counts because not all of it has biodiversity as one of its top objectives. So for example, areas of critical environmental concern, ACECs do not count. Wilderness areas on BLM land do count. National monument designations do count. And those because they have a higher level of restriction on the extractive uses, and there's lower risk of development on it.
Can you scroll down on a little bit to the left?
This way?
All right. Some of those are wrong. All right. So the Chino, and this is weird because I have submitted these properties with the WCB grant deed that required the conservation status. And so
Maybe coming out in this next update. So,
it was 2 or 3 years ago. So
bummer.
I see them on the map. They're just not the right color. So
Okay, well, I'll put you in touch with Green Info and we can
yeah.
sort it out. Sorry to have to make you do that twice.
Yep, that's all right. Any other region? Do we want to look at Riverside real quick? I don't think anyone's here from Ventura. Let's see. And again, we have the western side of Riverside. So if a land trust owns a property, do they need to have an easement on it? What is the mechanism that you're looking for from a private entity as opposed to like a state park?
Yep, so it needs to be durable. So there are land trusts that own properties that don't have any durable protection on this. A great example of this is Wildlands Conservancy. Quite a few of their parcels don't have that level of protection. And so for that, we would not count those. They can put some other sort of deed restriction that makes it difficult, and then we would be able to count it. But for ones that could be sold the next day and developed into some sort of housing, that wouldn't count as durable. We do know that 30% is not enough, right? 30% is actually not enough to save the catastrophic loss of biodiversity. So we do need lands that are not permanently locked up and protected that are contributing to biodiversity benefit, whether that's working landscapes or areas maybe that just don't have that permanent easement on it. And so I don't want to undersell at all the value of having those areas, even if they don't have a conservation easement on them, because we know we need much more than 30% to be able to support the biodiversity and ecosystems that make up California. All these yellow lands are important. All right, I think I have wowed everybody with all of this data on a Friday afternoon before a holiday break. We will, if there aren't any other questions or areas folks want me to dig into, we will send out, this is a PDF. Melanie, I might wait until January to send out those spreadsheets so I can maybe send out an updated version of those. And I will just say, I've said this on the other calls, 30 by 30 it's a framework. It is a framework by which people can drive money into conservation. It's a useful way to work with elected officials and others to talk about the importance of biodiversity conservation. It's also a way to lift up all of the important work that each of you are doing, to talk about it as part of a greater whole and help inspire people to keep this movement up. So really, it's about what you do on the ground. And we're incredibly grateful at the state for everything you do every day. It's really hard work. There's never enough money and never enough time. And I know asking folks to do reporting on top of that is not the most fun part. So just a big appreciation for what you do every day and for helping us make sure that we're accurately representing the work that is happening on the ground. How much more than 30% and how would that be enforced? Great question, Gloria. So a lot of scientists are debating a 50 by 50. I think that can be quite challenging. Personally, I will say there are over 190 countries in the world that are committed to 30 by 30, and many of them are struggling to get there. And so I think that there is value in leaning into getting to 30% by 2030 before we start pushing for 50 by 50, because we want to set objectives and goals that people can get to and then keep pushing that line out, right? Like, let's in 2028, when we're close to getting to 2030, start talking about what happens next. But I worry a little bit about really ambitious goals to push well beyond that when many places are struggling to get to the 30%. In California, we will get there. I'm confident with everybody like you doing all this great work, we will reach it. But there is an active debate among the scientific community of how much more than 30%. And I'm sure a lot of you on the phone have thoughts on that as well. Yeah, I'm super curious if there's a way we could talk about that next phase being those lands that are in agriculture or maybe don't have the permanent easement on it, but are still really important for biodiversity. And I also want to make sure we're managing and sustaining the lands that we do have conserved so that they're very healthy for biodiversities and the communities that surround them.
Absolutely. Any last questions before we hang up? Vic?
Well, maybe we don't have time for it. I was going to ask Megan about water conservation.
Ah, yes.
Which is a very long story. So.
I can answer it pretty quickly. So coastal waters, we didn't talk about coastal waters because all of the coastal waters in California are a public trust resource, right? So there's not individual private landowners on it. So the decision making for what counts for 30 by 30 is very much a kind of top-down analysis versus the land side, which is very much a grassroots up, everybody doing the conservation work in their local areas. Freshwater is calculated in with the land side. So if you zoom in on the land side, you'll see ribbons that are green, and those are wild and scenic rivers. Or you'll see two big blobs, one on Lake Tahoe, one on Mono Lake, and those are outstanding natural resource water designations. But we've really had a challenge with accurately representing freshwater on the land side because much of it's ephemeral and it's not just about protection status. It's about timing, water quality, temperature, flow, all of those things. So much more work is needed in that area.
Thanks.
I have one last question. In terms of a deadline, if we find things that need edits, hopefully
Yes.
changes from 3 and 4 to 1 and 2, or at least 2, is it March, the deadline that I heard?
Yes, if you can get it in before March, that would be key. So mark a month before March so that when everybody sees it on their calendar, they're like, oh, I got to get it in. But March will be the last set of updates we do for the remainder of this administration. So that March update will then inform a July, August, September report, depending on timing. And that will be the next tranche of data. And that'll be the next set of data that goes into this mapping update. And then you'll have to wait an entire another year to see the map updated. I wish we could do it a bit more real time, but it's actually quite a big lift on
Oh,
the
I'm sure it is.
capacity side. Marcia.
Yeah, I just wondered, the submissions that we all made to the 30 by 30 prospect list, those are still on that prospect list. Is that right? We don't have to update those.
Right.
It's a Melanie question.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That makes me
Thank
so
you for all
excited to
this
hear
good
there's a
work.
prospect
I can't believe
list.
all this mapping. So great.
Excellent. Well, Megan, thank you for doing this
Of
for
course.
the Southland, especially, an hour before I'm sure you're ready to take off for a couple weeks, but thank you, thank you. And I will get this posted and out to the group, and then we'll await January info from you. And I'm thinking maybe what we do in our January and February meetings is spend some time looking at the maps in detail together and trying to see if there's things that we can come up with that need to be edited. So
Thank you all again for the time. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season with lots of good food and family and friends. And thanks for the work you do all throughout the year.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
Megan.
Talk to y'all soon.
Happy
Bye.
holidays.
Bye.